It is 6:30 p.m. Today's Tuesday, May 7th, 2019, and this is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Marquette Township Board. If you would join us in the pledge, we'd appreciate it.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call, Randy, please.
Trustee LaRue? Here. Trustee Marks?
Present.
Trustee Everson?
Here.
Trustee Wiegand?
Here.
Treasurer Johnson?
Here.
Clerk Rattari is here, and Supervisor Durant.
Here.
Staff present is Manager Gerard and Legal Counsel Roger Zappa. No committee members or other staff members here.
Thanks.
He was leaving as I was
Public
coming.
comment? Anybody wish to address the board? Absolutely, sir. Come on up to the podium, sure. Name and address, please.
Limited to 3 minutes. 2503 Center Street. My name is John Hillier. I've been a 30-year plus resident of Marquette Township. Born and raised on Warner Street, so I've been in Marquette Township for over 55 years. Mother, 80 years old, still lives in Marquette Township, still pays taxes. I'm the one that you've got an email from that got the water damage in his basement from the street project that went on last fall, that I sat there and explained to the people when they were doing it what exactly was going to happen to my basement, and it did. I don't know if you had read your emails, Lynn, you're the only one that responded to it.
Yes, sir, that's my job.
Okay,
Yeah, the board
thank you.
usually doesn't do that.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Just curious why
But they
nobody
did,
else
they
did.
did get
but-
copies of it.
Okay, horrible amount of damage. I probably got $30,000 worth of damage in my basement because of this rerouting of this water. It's a shame. It really is a shame that I had to go through, and my family. I missed 7 days of work. I was pumping over 60 gallons every 15 minutes out of my basement. That is not winter thaw. That is direct from that, you running that water between the two houses of Greg Artles and mine. It actually went underground 25 feet from my basement and never came back out. So I don't know what the townships, I've got no response from anybody. Randy's very little. And I am just so disappointed in this township that I've lived here all my life and decided to raise my family in this township, 2 boys. I had breakfast at, I'm kind of mad right now, I'm having a hard time. Mr. Atari, I used to have breakfast at your grandparents' house. I lived right down the street from you. I mean, this is sad that this happened to me, and I'm getting zero response from anybody. I mean, I've tried numerous people. I mean, I've got a little bit of help, but nothing from this group of people. Very little. Not even a phone call. Mr. Gerard said he'd get back to me sometime last week. I never got a phone call last week. I'm at wit's end. I don't know what to do. I thought the township took care of their taxpayers, but apparently this isn't the way I thought that I would be treated as a taxpayer. Getting flooded, no response or no help. And somebody said something to my wife when she called the township hall and she says, "This is our problem, why?" That was their response when she was talking to him on the phone. I'm not gonna say a name. He knows who he is. But that's just horrible. When she's in tears calling because we got 60 gallons of water pouring into our basement every 15 minutes. And that was his response. And I sat there with the architect last year and asked him, I said, "You seriously think all this drainage is going to pour into the backyard of these 2 houses and it's not going to do any damage to my basement?" He said, "No, there's a good enough grade going down there, blah, blah, blah. It'll run right into that creek." Well, it did. I got video. If any of you would like to see the video, I videotaped the creek. I can show you right where it went underground. It's 25 feet from my basement. It's sad. I mean, you can all sit here and stare at me. I don't know. I mean, what do you think I should do? What's your opinion with what I should do? Do you have any?
We do have a procedure we have to follow. This is your time to tell us
Okay.
whatever you want, and then we can comment after. We can't.
I would like
a
something
back
done,
and forth.
some type of result.
We do
I
have a
mean,
response.
Mr. Gerard, my driveway got broke when they did this project. That still hasn't been fixed. He said the road stuff's got to come off. I see cement trucks going up and down the road every day. My driveway still hasn't been fixed. They never came back and seeded alongside my driveway. They never, I had to pick up all the rakes. Ours was like the last section that they did last year. The guy that when I was telling him about what was going on and why my basement's gonna get flooded, he said, "Well, we can't do anymore, we're out of money. All the money's gone." We spent that on other problems that we found during this construction. And that was at UPEA gentleman that was going around in the black pickup truck. I got a picture of the side of his truck so I could remember the number on the side of it, because I knew this was gonna happen. I told him, I'll see you in the spring. There was no doubt in my mind that water was gonna go in my basement. And I don't know how they thought they could just dump that much water between somebody's home and it not cause any problems. I got basement walls, my retaining walls in my backyard are starting to sag in now because the ground's so saturated from all this water, they're caving in on me. I probably got more than $30,000 worth of damage. I'm gonna start having people come over and giving me bids, is all I can do. But it ain't coming out of my pocket, because this had nothing to do with me. And I guess I'm done with what I have to say. Just want to let you know how I feel. I'm very, very disappointed in the township. Unbelievable. I've lived here all my life, and this is the last thing I thought how I'd be treated being a taxpayer all these years. Very sad, sad moment. If you'd have seen the tears in my wife's eyes, and yeah, it was sad. Thank you for your time.
Yes, sir, thank you. We do have some information to share with you and the board, as of like 20 minutes ago. Randy, if you want to give an update, or if even Roger, I don't know how much both of you know.
Well, I have talked with Mr. Leal here, and also spoke with his wife early on. You know, and the issue is we really have no documentation. We have opinions of what has occurred, but we have no documentation. And what Supervisor Durant is referring to is, for the last 2 weeks, we've been trying to set up a sit-down with the Road Commission, Drain Commissioner, UPEA, the contractors, to basically determine what the actual cause was, because we're restricted. The township has no authority to do anything with regard to the roads or the drainage. That doesn't fall within our purview. Falls under the Drain Commissioner or the Road Commission. Neither of them have been forthcoming with, I mean, it's, you know, basically what we're dealing with is the same thing Mr. Hilder's been dealing with, is fingers pointing back and forth about who's responsible. So that's what we're trying to do. We do have some indication. I've had indication from both Drain Commissioner and Road Commissioner on what they think the cure might be, but not what the cause is. You know, one says it's because the construction of the road contained rolled curbs that keeps the water on the road longer, which is what one of the objectives was of the road project, was to keep the water on the road rather than running off the sides of the road and destroying the roads, which is what broke down the roads. So I'm as frustrated as Mr. Leal, well, not quite, but I'm frustrated as well as Mr. Leal here in terms of getting it resolved. We are trying to schedule that meeting this week. As Supervisor Durant mentioned just 15, 20 minutes ago, I had a conversation with the engineer from the Road Commission, who is not in town. He's not going to be in town for probably about 6 weeks. But he did identify members of his staff that would be available to meet with us on his behalf. So we're trying to set that up for later this week or early next week to try and get some of this resolved. And I know it's not enough, but from our standpoint, from our statutory structure, we need to identify, is it a township problem? Because we are restricted in how we spend township funds and what we have responsibility for. I've asked Roger to look at it with regard to the contracts that we've had with UPEA and with the contractors, their subcontracts, and where we're at. So I mean, that is where we're at, is we're still trying to figure out what the actual cause is. I know that the Road Commission has an opinion, the Drain Commissioner has an opinion, Mr. Hillier has an opinion. We need to verify what it is, basically, and then fix it.
How long has this been going on? How many years has there been water in his basement?
Well, I'm not sure.
This is the first time, because of the road, they did the road last year. You were out there, you were one of the guys that came to my house last year. You stood in there, I pointed it out to you what was going on. I don't know if you remember last fall.
I remember, I was up there several times since.
Yes, and I was trying, and you were kind of working with me, and the whole thing, you know, snow came, the whole thing just went to an end, and spring came, and I got bombarded.
And right now, you're right, there are cement trucks running, but they're running on Class A roads. Right now, load restrictions are still on in Trowbridge. We can't even take our backhoe.
Water from going in my basement, 'cause every time
I understand.
it rains, it's gonna come back in my basement. This is gonna be an ongoing thing until this is taken care of. And I'm wondering whether it did the foundation of my home. I mean, 60 gallons every 15 minutes is an awful lot of water being poured into somebody's basement, all around your footings. It's bad.
We have been trying to get, I've checked with Randy every day since we knew this happened and tried to get updates, and we have been making phone calls, and, you know,
You know, one thing I did is I went up to Midway Rentals, and I bought they call it a garbage pump. I stopped that garbage pump right in that creek, stopped every bit of water from coming down it, and bought 150 feet of hose, rented 150 feet of hose, and ran it to the creek in my backyard, and that stopped it? Why can't the township do something like this until this is resolved? You must have something at that water department that could do that.
Well, I don't wanna speak to
Are
that.
you admitting to fault when you help a resident?
This is still your property, so
You can come on
that's
out.
not something this organization can, we have to make sure we do things by the law. So can we just try to figure that out first and figure out what we're allowed to do?
Yeah.
We have
it's
to-
an answers back, but I've gotten none, and that's the biggest problem, is it's been.
I understand.
Weeks and weeks, and like I said, you're the only one, maybe because you could respond, you
Yeah,
could respond.
yeah, the board can't do that.
I
so-
don't know that.
yeah.
so That's why I was.
That's why I at least acknowledge you right
Just kinda added
away.
to our frustration,
I
knowing that
understand.
nobody else is really.
Like, nobody
acknowledged.
cares, nobody's doing anything,
Okay.
I'm not hearing back, I understand.
That
But-
pump is still in there?
No, no, there's very little water running through it right now, but
Right
there's
now.
a continuous flow of water running through it, and it still is going underground. I went back with a spade shovel and dug as best I could, but there's so many trees and roots, I can only dig so much. I've tried to route it as best I can to that creek, but I'm still dealing with everything else going down there. I mean, I had a professional company come in, they had 8 air movers in my basement, and I still haven't seen that bill, a great big dehumidifier. I mean, I had to tear all my flooring out of my basement. My basement was 100% completed, all 90-pine tongue and groove, that water saturated itself 18 inches in some places up my walls. That's all water stained and black. That's all gonna have to be ripped out, because you can't sand knotty pine to get water stains out of it. You know, if I wanted to sell my house, that's the first thing that people are gonna see when they walk down to my basement, is see these stains all over along the bottom of my walls, and know my basement leaked at one point. I mean, I can't imagine what it's gonna cost me to redo what I had down there, a bar down there. Like I said, completely finished basement. The only place I wouldn't have carpeting was my laundry room, that tile. Everything else is carpet and vinyl flooring, or tongue and groove flooring, but interlocking pergola flooring. Had to rip all out because that's cardboard backing. That was saturated, and I pulled it up, it was just falling off of it.
Well, let us see what we can do.
Insurance because it's flood, my insurance is zero. I get nothing from my insurance company. I had to rent 6 shop vacs, plus that stuff I told you I got from Midway Rentals, just to try to keep the basement. 24 hours a day that water was coming through for 5 days. And the other couple of days was just coming in maybe 30 gallons every 15 minutes, not the 60 gallons that I was getting. The shop vacs were over $100 a piece. I burned 3 of them up because they never shut off. So much out of pocket, and like I said, I lost a week's pay, my wife lost 4 days' pay. My son was coming in, he works afternoon shift, he was coming in the evening so I could sleep a couple hours. I couldn't leave that basement. I was in there for a week, pumping water. Daylight till dark. And like I said, that isn't normal winter thaw. I've lived here all my life. I know what winter thaw does. And granted, yeah, the lake levels are up. I've heard all that from everybody, and it doesn't give you 60 gallons of water in your basement. And I never had a problem before they rerouted all that water, or opened every one of those culverts between Banningham and down Center Street and dumped it in the middle of my yard. I know where the finger should be pointed, but
Well, excuse me, let's see what we can figure out from the people that are supposed to know. We will be in
like I
contact.
said, everybody wants to point fingers everywhere else.
I understand.
I'm talking just what everybody you said you talked to too. and-
Yep.
I get them, they're telling me rent my own backhoe and just do it myself and pay the fine. That's what the guy at the road commission told me.
Hmm.
And I've already checked on culvert, they want $120 for 20 feet, I need 140 feet, I need connectors, I need approaches, I'll have another $1,000, and then I gotta rent a backhoe? There's another $1,000. And then what kind of fine am I gonna get? The DEQ or EA or whatever from Sault Ste. Marie comes up and she slaps me with a couple $100,000 fine, because I ran culverts and she tells me to take them out. Or if it's still a female, I don't know who's down there anymore, but.
And those are some of the things we're trying to deal with.
Yep. Let's see what we can figure out, okay?
Hope to hear from you.
You will. You will. When we have some answers. If we can get a hold of them this week, that would be ideal.
Yeah, but these gonna be guys that Randy's gonna be talking to that can actually make decisions, or are they gonna have to just refer?
These will be
to the other
people-
guy that's gonna be back in 6 weeks?
People we've had contracts with or who have state responsibility for these kinds of issues. Because we can't make that determination anyway. That's not up to us,
Yeah.
especially because we don't own the roads. It's so intertwined with the millage
Not
and,
so much the road now.
I understand.
Not the road. It's actually out of their 30, they did, and it's more in our yards now than it is the 30-foot right of way. They kind of went beyond that. Okay.
okay.
Has the drain commissioner been down there to look at it?
Yes.
Yeah. Both road and drain, road commission and drain commission are familiar with it.
We just haven't sat down and we've been kind of waiting for Jim, and he's out of town for a while, so. We'll see what we can figure out. Okay,
It's not gonna go away.
I'm glad you came
No,
in.
it's not. That's my problem. I
No,
can't afford to
it's-
take a week off every spring and suck water out of my basement, because, when we get a heavy rain, and I'm gonna get bombarded again. I just don't understand, I mean, too much politics, I guess, because I thought the township would be down there assisting the taxpayer when they have a problem like that. I guess I'm wrong, I'm surprised when that happened.
We have-
I know when
we
it
have
was
limited-
taken up the street, that would-
Limited capabilities and authority, believe it or not. We can't really do as much as people think we can. We'll see. We'll see what we can figure out. Okay? Thanks for coming in. I'm glad you did, so everybody could talk to you.
Any questions? You have my number,
Yes, sir.
email, whatever. I would like to talk to some, I hate not hearing nothing.
I know,
If
I know.
That's the killer of the whole thing, is you don't.
Just waiting, I know. Okay. Any other board member comment in relation? Okay.
All right, thanks for your time.
Yes, sir. Thanks for coming in. I know some of what he's going through we had the same problem, foot and a half of water floating around the furnace and the water heater for 5 days. Reg didn't sleep either. So,
Hi.
I
Why
didn't have a road issue.
Why is the water going there now, so much now? Because of the way we did it, or what?
Oh, no. Well, we're, as I said, we're holding, the water typically in the past with no curbing and with no anything else, the water would roll off the side of the road. That's what destroyed the roads. So, the project was to keep the water on the roads to get to the point where it naturally would meter off into creeks and streams and those kinds of things. I have no idea what happened at this particular site. We have 3 different opinions, 3 different people. Mr. Hillier has his opinion, Road Commission has one, and Drain Commissioner does. But with regard to curing it, the water's gonna go somewhere, so where does it go next? So I mean, and that's what we have. We have a wet township. I mean, the water table's about 2.5 feet. And there's water if you look around, I mean, back here, we've never had water back here. Water's running back here. It's just, I think we had a combination of things this year in addition to the rolled curbing, and I'm not sure there's rolled curbing
Not in front of his
in
house.
his location, but typically around the township, there is rolled curbing on the new roads that were reconstructed. But wherever there's a depression, there's water in it. I mean, there's water everywhere. It's a combination of the late snow, heavy snowpack melting all at the same time we started to get rain. Ground saturated. We don't have equipment to go fix that. We have a small backhoe, and right now, we can't use it because the load restrictions are still on. It exceeds the weight capacity unless
Not
there's
the
a,
restrictions
quote,
coming
an
off.
emergent. And not off until at least the middle of this month. I checked on that again today, for at least for another week. Well, we have snow forecast, snow and rain forecast tomorrow. So, it's it's a bad situation. You know, I understand he's got a bad situation at his house. I mean, your place was flooded, mine was flooded. We've got half a dozen places around the township that are flooded because there's nowhere else for the water to go. You know, the board's been working on an ordinance for, what, a month now? Ordinance revision to try and reestablish the ditches and culverts that, number one, were either not installed properly, or number two, have been filled in, either by individuals or by sand, road sand. You know, we talked about that right here on Moran Street. The issue there is the water's going down to a catch basin that's plugged, so it's staying on the road. That's outside of our ability and our jurisdiction. So, okay, that's all that I have.
Go ahead.
It's not my intention to inflame the situation, and I was going to hold my tongue as long as I could, but, and while I sympathize with Mr. LaHillier's issue, the reason he has more water is because when they put the road in, they cleaned the road ditches out and they replaced the culverts upstream. So the water arrives faster. If you look at Mr. LaHillier's property, once it gets to the edge of his property, there is no more road ditch all the way across his property. If you recall the meeting with the county, and Mr. Iwaniki made the statement that when that subdivision was platted, there was road ditches on both sides of the road all through the Trowbridge. This has been filled in. There's no road ditch there. And I don't know who filled it in. I don't know how long ago they filled it in. But their solution is to fill it in and make yard in the front and divert the water down the side into the creek in the back. And that worked fine while the water flow was low because the culverts were plugged and the ditches had grown over. But along comes the road repair and we clean all that out and we replace the culverts. Now he's got more water, and his culvert that tries to get that water down to the creek is undersized. So he needs a bigger culvert. Now, I'm sorry, but that is not a township issue in my perspective. That is a property owner issue. He needs to fix that by either reestablishing the ditch across the front of his yard, and if that ditch was reestablished, that water would run across the front of his yard and continue down to the creek, the same creek he's trying to put it in now. It would continue down to that creek on the other side of his property, where it's supposed to go. Or he can work with the drain commissioner and come up with some kind of a drainage mechanism down that side of the property and replace the culvert that's in there. But that, again, that's a homeowner issue. It's not an issue for the township to address. If the county addressed it, and what I would fully expect the county to do if they address it, by their own ordinance. And it's by the ordinance we reviewed when we made our ordinance. If the county comes in and reestablishes that road ditch across the front, somebody's got to pay for that. By their ordinance, the property owner pays for that. So you're back in the same problem again, and I sympathize with this problem. I don't know if he filled the road ditch in or not. I suspect not. But it's been filled in, which the problem falls back to the property owner. And I'm sorry to come across so callous sounding about the whole situation, but it's not a road rehab dollars issue. It's not a township issue. It's a county issue. They have an ordinance that covers it. They have elected not to enforce it because they don't want to end up in litigation over it. It's not worth it for them. Other than that, it's the drain commission. I don't know how you get away with taking the water off of the road and running it in a culvert and taking it back to the drainage district. I'm beyond me how you can work that out with the drain commissioner. I'll be surprised if the drain commissioner ever approved anything like that when it was put in initially. But that's the problem. I've been out there and looked at it. That's the problem as I see it. I feel sorry for him, but it's really not a township issue from my perspective.
Has that been explained to him? Just like you just did with us?
Yes. Over a year ago. He came to a road committee meeting.
Pete?
Makes me, when I hear these problems, it makes me a little disappointed in our road committee and also the engineer. I mean, they should have been able to, you know, there are supposed to be engineering problems like that when you put a road in with culverts and containing your water. That it should have been, some of it should have been seen. And you can put a culvert in there, because the road commission wanted to put one down on Granite Street, in which I wouldn't advise it anyways, but, you know, they have another problem down there, but they should have foreseen this. And they said, well, we're using the same amount of water. Well, we're not using the same amount of water. We're collecting from different streets and that, and putting down different streets. And I'll just say, I'm just disappointed in the road commission, I'm disappointed in engineering that they didn't foresee some of these things. Because before, the water would just flow out easy on the yards and, you know, sink down. But now we're forcing the water, wherever we've got a weak point, they're getting it. And so I think he can put a culvert down there. If the road commission wanted to put it down on Culvert Street, culvert over on Granite Street, maybe they could put one in there to relieve the water up there. But it's a terrible situation to have. If you ever had problems with water, you can understand the frustration he might be going through, or must be going through. So
It's not the only issue. I mean, we have a number of similar issues, maybe not to the extent of the internal flooding, but yard flooding in a number of areas in the town, in Trowbridge in particular. On the over in the Huron Street area, Granite area, down at the end of Werner, the Meeske end of Werner. We have a lot of water. We have a lot of water in the township, and essentially Trowbridge is built on a swamp. I mean, it's the way it is. There's a lot of water there, and most of those properties are below grade.
Vanderboom and Fair Avenue washed the whole thing right out there. You know, now they have to go back. I'm just hoping that the county has a plan to come back and fix these things, which I'm not hearing from many of them.
Well, but again, that is the issue. I'm sorry, but again, that is the issue that we are currently engaged in with the road commission. Attorney Zappa has forwarded to the road commission the action that the board took on your proposed ordinance, and they've forwarded it to the county board for review. So that's the reason we're in this discussion, is this is a township-wide, particularly as bad in Trowbridge, because that's our urban area, but it's not just there. We have flooding issues pretty much everywhere in the township.
Well, I just don't like it, Randy. I mean, we've been dealing with this Moran Street, and they're supposed to have done that a long time ago. Now you're wearing out the streets. Yep. You know, and there's potholes, they're not fixing the potholes, and yes, you can put the blacktop in, the water will wash it out, but, you know, you can't just keep doing it. You can't put a Band-Aid on these things for years and years and years. They have to get up and step up and do something.
First step is the ordinance.
Yeah.
First step is to get the authority.
And they have to take more interest in when they have a road project or fixing. The county's got to step up and be part of that more so than they have been in the past.
John?
I think that the suggestion that a culvert be put in where there isn't a culvert now, when one does that, they have to really understand that that's really going to convey the water that will be there further downhill. All you're going to do is add someone else to the issue. You may end up by putting in a culvert along one side of the property. You may resolve the problem for the person for the time being, but no, you're conveying water further downhill. And now you really have put in a culvert, supported that, and now you got water downhill in somebody else's basement. And I think that's the point Dave was making, is that whatever you do, you have to look at it and ask the county to look at it closely, because they could be simply transporting the problem to someone else. And that then becomes your problem if you put in the culvert. So there's more to this, and I think that Lynn's comment about let's just see what we can do, see what's possible, and see what we can do without getting into a bigger fix. And I think that's about all you can do.
And I'll show you a good example of that any day, John. Exactly what you just said is happening now, and that's causing a problem to the neighbors, so someday I'll show you it.
Dan?
Is there room downstream from his situation to put in a retention type basin like they have over here on Werner that could collect the water like it does off the parking lots and release it slower, so that then that water from his property could go into that retention basin? You know, it would fill up so far and then it would just slowly be let out. So you're not creating a problem downstream.
That's
Those
for
work
them to
fairly well, I think.
It's,
Dave?
We can spend the whole meeting talking about
That
this.
whole issue east of the LaHillier property is lowland. And the creek that runs behind Mr. LaHillier's property circles back around and comes up near the road. And that's where, if there was a road ditch along the front of his property, that's the same creek the water would be getting dumped into. But that whole area is low, and in fact, it would be a floodplain where the water is going to set in there before it goes down. But that's part of the drainage district. But with respect to his comments about the driveway and redressing the sod and seeding, that job's already been let out and ready to go as soon as we get the load restrictions off. But I will make another comment. When you replace the driveway, you will notice there is a culvert underneath the driveway that's missing.
Yeah, it's flat. All in front of his property.
Ice to the water.
Just water, thank you. Are we good on this? We can go to,
And we could talk all night on it, but
yes.
drainage is our number one
Wait till we get some
problem.
more information. Okay, consent agenda. Anything else need to be pulled out of there? Otherwise, a motion? I better read it. Yes, Dave.
I don't need to pull them out, but I would like to comment on two items, B1 and B2, and ask a couple questions. But they don't need to be pulled out.
Protocol. Work? Does it matter?
Don't matter.
Okay, go for it. Go ahead.
My questions?
Yeah, go ahead.
The first was with the checks for the month, and I see we're still spending money on the SAW grant management, but I haven't seen a asset management program yet. And here's another $4,000 expense, and I assume that's someplace along the same lines. And then I got this answer or question answered from the manager before the meeting. It's the one on the UP Engineers and Architects, a stormwater review at Best Buy MDOT roundabout. And it surprises me that if it's an MDOT project and we have required work in that project, that we are not compensated for the work that we put into that project. And I know that the townships are accountable for the irrigation of the roundabout and the planning of the roundabout and the lights and all that. The township is liable for that, and I assume then that that's what this is part of. But there's some other issues that came up along with this with respect to the supervision that it takes for the relocation of the sewer and water that requires township personnel, that we're not being compensated for. It's just out of our pocket. But it's part of an MDOT project. I don't understand. And I got the answer from the manager, and I don't agree with the reasoning behind it, but it appears that we're just kind of stuck with it. But it just seems that if it's a project put together by MDOT and we have expenses that are part of that project, that the township should be reimbursed for their expenses. The last one is down on the budget resolution, and there's 108 hours of overtime for the closing up of the Warming Building and that Lions Field lockups. And I thought we had split the shift so that there was an afternoon shift on that took care of that. I'm just wondering why we got overtime hours for that.
Yeah, we did, and what you're seeing there is the ball season, baseball season has started, and basically the bulk of that overtime is regarding setting up the field and clearing the field, cleaning the field for the teams. We're still the home field for the women JV softball team of Marquette Senior High and also Little League. So we're now in that season, so the majority of that overtime revolves around the baseball. That's why I had Lois add that this baseball season has started.
Okay.
Now, with regard to the UP engineers and architects, I'm not certain on that one, but I think we will be reimbursed for that. I'll have to check on that for you, Dave. But what I was referring to is when they're as part of the roundabout project, when they're moving or relocating utilities that we're ultimately responsible for, that we'll have the ownership of, we have to have one of our inspectors there under the DEQ part of it, because it's our utility. The engineers, when they're constructing it, have their I think there are four MDOT inspectors that are working on the project, I think Kirk said. But when it's the final inspection we do, basically that's accepting what they've done, because we're responsible then for it from that point forward. That's usually one of our staff does that.
I understand that comment, but it just seems to me that is our inspection costs are part of the overall project
Correct.
cost. And I
Correct.
don't understand why we're not reimbursed for that.
It's a good question. I mean, I wish we were, because it could be money back in our budget. But I think on the UP engineers and architects, that $445 roughly, I think we will be reimbursed from that, from what I understand from Kirk. That's part of the actual construction project.
And my other question was the asset management program. Are we getting any closer to that?
Yeah, where are we with that? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, I did. When I wasn't here last meeting, obviously, but I did watch the tape, so I did ask Kirk and Isaac about that. And we're in the process of that. And basically what it amounts to is it's a multiple year project, and where they're doing both the water and the wastewater. The water basically has essentially been completed on our side. They've gone out and GPSed and marked and identified all of the assets that we have, categorized them, and have submitted that to the DEQ. So we're waiting for the DEQ to respond back, and they had done that in December of 17. What's pending right now is the wastewater, the sewer side of it, and that data has been collected and it's been submitted to Stantec, who is the one that's now putting together taking the data basically and putting together the plan for submittal. And the whole package has to be submitted by November of this year, completed. Now, I know there's been a lot of questions about that. What I would suggest is maybe the board consider scheduling a single topic work session sometime during the day to have Isaac and Kirk come in and give you a rundown on the whole thing, show you what's been submitted, and what the plan is to meet the November deadline for this year for the full submittal. And that's certainly something I think that would be valuable for you.
I guess the first question that jumps out when you say that was submitted in December of 2017 is we haven't seen some of the big concerns that this board has dealt with over the past 2 years is the overall replacement program for the infrastructure that we have and the life expectancy, and so that we could ensure that we're setting enough money aside so that we don't have to go out and borrow money when this has to be replaced. And if the water is actually done, do we not get a report on that until the DEQ actually approves it? Or
The data has been submitted. The DEQ will now come back with the schedule, with the ages, and give us the basic timeline on them. And that's what Stantec is currently doing with the wastewater as well. They've got all the data points, and that will be coming back for the final report that will basically, similar to what we did with the roads. The asset management plan with the roads, we had a system already established by Michigan Tech basically that we utilized. And that's what's happening now, is they're putting together, we're basically constructing that plan, and that will be coming back to the board, but it has to be submitted It has to be submitted in final format November of this year.
Those are my questions.
Do you want to schedule a work session?
I think it'd be valuable to do that. You know, Isaac can run through the data points. You know, we've had our building and ground staff, they picked up, they bought the equipment and the programming, which the board had approved previously, and have submitted the data that's been collected now for compiling into the final project.
For those of us who have a burning need to know, yeah.
We can do that.
Sure.
Do that on the next agenda.
It would be nice to have some information before we have a work session.
It's not a burning, we can do it on the next agenda. It's not a,
I can have Isaac and Kirk put together a synopsis, basically, that we could send out to the board. I'm sure they could put that together.
Then we can
put
set
it
a
on
date.
the,
Yeah.
to do the next agenda.
Yeah, I guess what I would suggest is it'd be nice to see all that summary and synopsis first.
Yeah, because I know they put
And decide if we
together,
need a work session.
I know they put together maps and lists and, you know, ages of pieces of the.
Because I don't really think it's very
systems.
productive if you don't get that stuff until at the work session.
All right, I'll get with Isaac and have him pull that together with Kirk.
Yes, sir, go ahead. Go ahead, Pete.
I just had one question. On our tractor maintenance, we see we've got $1,000. Do we know how much these, like, something like that is costing us over the years? And also, I think we should look at something different because of we've added more and more properties and that to take care of. This might not be the most dependable one.
Well, it's too small for what we're doing with it.
Well, too small,
Yeah.
and
When we
that
originally.
particular brand is having problems, so it would,
Well, when we originally purchased that, basically, it was basically for the ball field and the ice rink.
Right.
Yeah, we've been using it for parking lots, we've been using it for all of the new pathways that have been constructed, we've been using it for a variety of things. And basically, what you're seeing is things are wearing out. It's a small one, it's a 3220. And the particular repair that you identified there, what happened was two of the motor mount bolts sheared off, and they had to be removed and replaced, and that was $1,000. Most of that was labor. But we are looking right now. We've been looking. In fact, I had our building and grounds caretaker get quotes on a larger piece of equipment, and we'll.
the motor isn't big enough for what you're.
Well, the equipment's not big enough. I
Right.
mean, and we've had a couple of issues where, you know, a piece of foreign matter was sucked into the auger on the snow blower and sheared some gears, and, you know, it's just too small for what we're using it for. So we are looking at a larger piece of equipment used. Obviously, we're going to try and pick up a used one, but that'll have to come back to the board because that'll be a sizable expense. But this thing has worked well for us for what we've done. We're just wearing it out. It's just too small for what we're using it for.
And I just
Like our
wonder, at what point you say enough is enough?
Yeah, well, we'll continue. I mean, we'll keep it. We'll put it back for its basic use, which was with the ball field and the ice rink. You know, that's what it was originally purchased for. But for clearing parking lots and things such as that, it's just, you know, we just need a bigger piece of equipment.
I agree.
Yeah, it's the same issue we have with Public Works. I mean, you know, it would be nice if we had a piece of equipment, an excavator, that we could go and do some work, like at the fire department when we had the break there. We have to contract all that out because we don't. We have a small backhoe. That's all we have.
Ernie?
I think Dave brought this up on the US 41 project, and after I read that from the email, I got thinking, this goes back to when we first started this, when MDOT came to us. And I think if you go back and look at that meeting, there was no discussion by MDOT that any costs, lighting,
Oh, yeah.
anything like that.
Oh, yeah, there was all grants, and we had, you know, we've got
I know, what I'm
matches.
saying is when MDOT made this presentation about the roundabouts at our meeting, they did not say anything about lighting would be our responsibility, landscaping would be our responsibility, nothing else. So all of a sudden, these costs just keep building and building and building and that. And I started looking at this and I said, here again, these are unknown costs, all of a sudden they're coming back to us and that. And what is this gonna cost at the end? If we had known this ahead of time, my personal feeling at that point in time, if you wanna put a roundabout in, put it in, but you're paying for the whole thing. We're not paying any part of it now.
Well,
We
what
didn't
we're-
have any of that information.
Well, what we're paying is we're paying the matches on the grants. We had $25,000 match that we had for the grants to cover the lighting. We knew from day one that the federal funds would not allow the lighting to be paid. We
No,
knew
that's,
that.
what-
That's
that's what
not-
he's saying. When they made the presentation, they did not tell us any of that.
Anything.
Well, yeah, that was in the contract. I
Not in the
mean,
first
Not,
presentation.
not
Oh,
when they
maybe not
appeared,
the-
not when
maybe
they
not.
went to this meeting and talked to us here about it.
I don't know about that, but it was.
Go back and look at the
yeah,
meeting.
It was in the contract that,
And but-
we were responsible for the lighting.
Then we start looking at our staff time
Mm-hmm.
to do all this, how much you put in there. So what has this really cost the township for those roundabouts that MDOT wanted?
Well,
We
a lot of
didn't want
that,
'em.
but a lot of that we get reimbursed for.
We don't get our staff time reimbursed.
Yeah, we do. We get, some of it, we get reimbursed on some of that staff time. Not all of it, but, but a portion of it we get reimbursed on. But, these are all things that were identified in the contracts that, that we signed.
Right, after the fact, but not the day that, not the meeting that they stood at the podium and made the presentation.
Oh,
There was no
yeah.
part of that, because when I talked to the supervisor at Sands, they were talking about putting a roundabout out there. And I said, ask this question, because they're not gonna tell you that. So they made the presentation. Supervisor asked the question, and that says, no, you have to pay for all that. Supervisor says, we don't want it, because of that. Other than that, they were all foregoing something like that. But all of a sudden, the costs start showing up and that, then MDOT has a sneaky way of getting things in, then you end up paying for everything.
Dan?
Can we get a breakdown of what we're paying for staff and what's being reimbursed?
Sure.
Then there's not gonna be a question. We're gonna know exactly dollar for dollar what's being reimbursed on it and what is out of our pocket.
Yeah, our obligations in this project were for the lighting, for both roundabouts, and then for the installation of the irrigation structure in the two roundabouts. And those have come before the board and been approved.
That's true after
We
the
knew we
fact.
had to do it.
Right.
After the fact.
Okay. All right, let me read the consent agenda.
Are we got, that's not through yet?
No. Approval of regular meeting minutes of April 16th and the work session minutes of April 11th. Bills payable in the amount of $116,920.69. We have a budget amendment 2019-02, so we'll do a roll call. Received committee and other reports, Marquette BLP's agenda of April 23rd. I thought you might enjoy reading that. In the minutes of March 26th. Road Committee agenda of May 7th, Rec Committee draft minutes of April 16th, Poverty Solutions from the University of Michigan, revised 2019 board meeting schedule for the Marquette County Solid Waste Management Authority. They're changing meeting dates and times. Marquette Area Waste Treatment Facility Advisory Board meeting minutes of March 21st, the May utility billing calendar, and correspondence is usually just from Charter. This case, a letter introducing manager, the new manager of the State Government Affairs, and additional channels information. So,
I move to accept the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
and do you want to read the
Well,
budget amendment now?
I think Trustee Wiegand kind of covered that in his statement, but the reason for the budget amendment, the second one, 1902, was for $8,000 expenditures for after-hours lockup at the Lions Field and 108 hours of overtime through April. Overtime hours will continue, as well as field preparation and maintenance in conjunction with the baseball season. The offset will come from fund balance.
Support, so roll call?
Clerk Rattari is a yes. Trustee LaRue.
Yes.
Trustee Wiegand.
Yes.
Trustee Everson.
Yes.
Trustee Marks.
Yes.
Treasurer Johnson.
Yes.
Supervisor Durant.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Then if there are no changes on the remainder of the agenda, we need a motion.
So moved.
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, privilege comment, we have none for Board of Education. Community linkage. I have a couple things to share that I just thought tonight that would be good to let you know. I attended a meeting for water mitigation funding from FEMA, which is pretty interesting, and I will give you some information on that coming up. They are in the process, the feds are in the process of working with the state. There were state district representatives there from Houghton. Our person is up in Houghton for this area. And we talked about water at length and how it affects everything. And I told them of some of the issues we were having, and they sent me 161-page documents and legal this and that. But anyway, I'll put a little blurb together for you so that you can get an update on it. And they're going to keep me in the loop, of course, and there were other supervisors there too. There's probably a dozen of us. As to how they're gonna, it involves flood insurance and everything, and hazard issues and a bunch of stuff. So I will give you an update on that. I will also have in the next packet a little handout I'm putting together on the 2020 census. And Pete was at that meeting too. It was very interesting what we're gonna have to go through, we as a nation, to do this and do it right. But I've got some bullet points on that too, to keep us up to date on what we have to do. We need to educate the public and how this is gonna unfold next year, April 1st of 2020, when everybody tries to get counted in the country. And the importance of it, it's not just a matter of the government knowing how many people are in Marquette Township. It's very far-reaching for us and for our people. So I'll give you an update on that next meeting. And I guess Pete listened or went to the City Commission meeting on the wastewater presentation, and we are going to discuss wastewater a little bit further down in the agenda. But the thing that irritated me the most, as far as the city meeting went, was Brad made the whole presentation just like he did. Some of us were up in Negaunee and went to that meeting when they made their presentation. And there was one statement that Brad made about no tipping fees for the people out of the county. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. To try to incorporate outside users for the recycling part of his whole program. Anybody outside of Marquette County would pay a tipping fee. And they made one statement that said Marquette County residents would not pay a tipping fee. And I believe everybody left that meeting thinking this was not going to be a cost.
But then he brought it back.
A little bit. Because what they are not really defining is, yes, we have a $3 million, they do, a $3 million grant. It's not a grant, it's a loan. That $3 million has to be paid back, plus the $1.9 million shortfall that they can't figure out how to fund. And they didn't explain that at the City Commission meeting, and he really didn't explain it at the Negaunee Township, County Township meeting. So I just want to do that prelude to our discussion on how we're going to support this. And if you need more information, we can. But I didn't want to forget to mention how it was presented to the city and how gung-ho they were for the whole idea, thinking this is great and we're going to get glass recycled. And they did say, oh no, it's not going to be recycled, it'll be repurposed if we can sell it. So that's all I'm going to say right now on that. So anything else for community linkage? Is anybody hearing anything from the public that you want to share? Go ahead, Dave.
You're still in need of a report from you, from the ad hoc committee for the replacement for the manager and the superintendent of public works.
No, we did that. The recommendation from the committee was that we follow the HR policies that are in place.
That's not what we did.
When we left the meeting, you were going to file a report with the board as far as what the ad hoc committee come up with and the discussions in the ad hoc committee, and we haven't seen that yet.
You're talking about
Why it was formed to start with. And you're going to come back and give us a report, but it never came back.
What are you talking about? Pete's, or Randy's job or Kirk's job?
Both of them was what the ad hoc committee was formed for. And the end of that meeting, there was supposed to be a report generated so that the board had something to, the ad hoc committee was supposed to report back to the board with their findings.
Did you meet at all? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we did, unless
But
I'm
we never
not-
had a report back.
Yes, we did, because we talked about it as a board.
No, we never.
And
We've, the,
we had a consensus and everything, the committee, but there was never a presentation back to the board.
You'd have to go in closed session and do it.
Can't go in closed session.
when the group of three were organizing to meet, they were going to meet the next day at 11 o'clock. And clearly, it was talked about in detail that the only mission the committee of three had was to sit with our manager and listen to what he had to propose and come back to the township board and tell us what they heard. That's the end of it. There isn't any other part of that mission that goes beyond that. And it's been about 7 weeks.
I know David asked a couple of times if you were gonna give a presentation or just a verbal explanation of what we talked about, and it's never happened.
But clearly, that's the only mission that they have. So there can't be any other activity planned or put into a report unless it's going to go to the township board as a whole.
Okay. I swear we talked about it at the next meeting, but I'll go back and check my notes. I'm sorry. I totally don't remember not doing that. I'm sorry. Randy?
On that subject, the only thing I remember is the committee met, and they met with the manager, and through consensus, they thought that what the manager's plan was okay, and that's the end of it.
Yeah.
That's the total end of
That
it,
was all
because
I remember.
we can't talk about anything more than that.
No, we can't.
So that's it.
And
It
we
was
did
okay.
that.
That's the end of it.
But you were gonna put something in writing to the board, and I think that's what Dave was saying, was never, just to that effect, and it was never, I don't remember it.
It was on the agenda and we talked about it, but,
If the board wants a written report, I think we can do that very easily.
yeah. I can go back and listen to
But I do remember,
the meeting.
because the supervisor said we met, and even the manager said, they met, and the committee agreed with what his thought process was, and
To proceed
to
with,
proceed what he was doing,
Which is what he
and,
did.
and you were part of that meeting, correct?
Mhm. Yep.
And that was it, because they can't do anything more than that. That's the only mission they had.
Exactly.
But the
it
discussion that
But
we,
the
It was
mission.
not reported back.
The mission doesn't have to be talked about in detail at a township board meeting. Clearly, we can have a work session.
Well, remember, anything that we have is open to the public, unless it's closed session, and this is not a closed session item.
right.
So without, violating, confidentiality, we can't really talk too much more about it than the committee has.
Then that was the reason, because the prospective
They
applicant
can clearly
didn't
talk
want.
more
I-
than nothing at all.
I guess what I was assuming, and the reason I brought it up, is I assumed there was going to be a summary of the process that the manager presented, and what our thought process was at the ad hoc committee for recommending that he proceed with that process.
Reasoning
Without
and
any names?
rationale.
Yeah.
Without names?
Well, you could,
Yeah, we
that's
could do
certainly
that.
fine.
And I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, that doesn't violate any
No, but you can't bring any
confidentiality
names
thing.
or
Oh,
anything
we-
into
No,
that.
we weren't gonna
No,
talk names.
no.
We're just talking about the process, what the process looks like, and what the rationale for recommending that we just proceed with that process, the way it was set up.
I think we can very, very easily communicate that.
I'm sorry if I messed
Does
you up.
that cover it, John?
Well, I understood it, so I don't know where
Yeah.
anyone else was
That's
on it,
why
but
thought
I
maybe
knew it was the
missing
end of it.
something.
My understanding of what the discussion before it happened is we were discussing, do we go outside of Marquette County for a manager's job, or do we do something else? And I believe that we should go out, even though you put them all together, I think we should go out and see what's out there. That's, most cities, Nagani went through it, Istamene went through it, and Istamine's gonna be doing it again, and Nagani, and, you know, that's what I would like to see. Go out and see what's out there and see who would be interested. We did it for the fire department, but we did it 2 different ways, so.
And that was all covered by a couple documents that we currently have in the township. And it was just a matter of going over those documents and presenting them and our rationale as to why we thought we should just move ahead with them as presented. And obviously, and I think it was also discussed at the ad hoc committee level, that the manager replacement scenario needed to be fine-tuned as to where we go and how we get there, but the general process was set in place. And those are the kind of things that I thought we were going to put in a report and submit to the board so everybody had the same understanding.
So you just said most of it. You still want me to type it up?
Except they need to be presented with the documents.
Okay. Oh, you want the whole
And,
backup?
yeah, and an explanation
Oh
of
my
why we're,
gosh.
sure.
What kind of engineering degree do we want for that?
Yeah, it was just an ad hoc committee to make a recommendation. Do we
Right.
have to go this far in detail to have the manager do his job?
Well, unless you want to have all the board members sitting here talking about it and nobody has the same opinion.
The opinion doesn't have anything to do with the process.
Understanding, I'm sorry.
It's not the manager's job to go find a replacement for himself.
No, well, we're talking about 2 different positions.
I
That's
know.
why I asked you. If we're talking about Kirk's position, which was the intent,
Right.
was what his direction was, we brought back to the board, the intent was to let the manager hire his employee. That's it. If you want me to type that up, I will do that.
Dave wants that typed up.
That's fine, I'll do it.
Missing the point, but go ahead.
I guess so.
Were you guys informed? I mean, do you remember something being discussed about this, or is it just Dave and I that are thinking that it wasn't brought up?
No, I'm thinking that since the group of 3 were picked, there has not been one word on this board.
Possibly you guys talked or something between each other. I don't know,
Well-
but I don't remember
I'll go
anything
find the minutes.
being.
I'll find the meeting.
Okay.
And I'll take
Yeah,
care of it.
maybe I can look at a few video footage, because I remember talking about it just briefly, not
It was
long.
pretty short. It wasn't this long, that's for sure. Ernie?
I have to agree with the clerk that there was a small amount of discussion on that. And did not go into a lot of detail in that. And more or less said that the direction that the manager was going on the position was probably the correct way to go in that, and we're in the process of changing. That would be on the public works and that. So, there wasn't much discussion, it was just a much.
I'll find in the meeting and send it to the board where it was talked about. It
The only
isn't
thing I
very
remember
long.
is Dave asking that same question before, so we'll find out.
Okay.
Sometimes my memory isn't too good, but sometimes it is. Sometimes I get mixed up.
Semco agreement there.
Yes, let's talk about 7A, the SEM temporary workspace request. I believe Roger's looked at this. I don't know if that falls to you, or if you just want me to say you're okay with it. I don't want to speak for you.
I have looked at it, and basically the important component of that you approved last year, and that's the permanent easement to put the Semco line in, because recall originally they were talking about putting it through the middle of your well field. This was an alternative that was discussed at length and came across the road the rerouted direction down essentially along the road, along the top of the ridge, just north of the river, the snowmobile trail. So there's a temporary easement that was also granted to Semco last year to basically, because they need more space when they're putting the pipeline in and so forth, than the width of the place where the pipe is going to go. That's already been granted. Now that they've gone out there and taken a look at things, they are proposing a couple of additional temporary easements. These are not permanent. This is while the work is being done, while they're digging the hole, they need places to park equipment and places to put dirt, things of this nature where the road is narrow. And you can see on the diagram that was in the packet that was attached, there are a couple of places all on the south side of the road. In other words, the river would be to the south of the road, and the little blue areas are the 5-foot or 10-foot wide places that they would like some additional temporary easements, and they're proposing to pay at the same can't talk tonight, the same per acre price on the temporary easement as they did for the other temporary easements, and that amounts to about $500 additional. I clarified with the gentleman from Semco who's requesting this. Is that going to extend the amount of time for the project? It is not. It's not going to interfere with much of anything. They will have to remove some brush, possibly some trees out of the temporary easement area. Since it is on the top of the bluff, will there be any type, or not really a bluff, but a fairly severe slope, will there be any erosion? They will take all measures necessary to minimize any type of erosion and basically put it back together in a as good or better condition as they found it in. So I have no issues with it. I think we've had our questions essentially answered on that. Whether to do it or not, of course, is a board decision, but from a legal standpoint, I don't see any impediments or issues with it.
I recommend that you go forward and approve the temporary easements as requested.
So moved. Second.
Motion and support. Any other questions or discussion?
I have a question. When they do the restoration of these temporary sites, and we ran across this problem with South Vandenboom and all that with the restoration, and you get and they're done and everybody's happy and they go away, and then we get this rainstorm comes through and everything washes out the roads. Is there part of this agreement that says they go back and fix it until it's taken root, or are we just stuck with what's left?
I didn't look at the terms of that agreement. It's going to be whatever was agreed to in the other temporary easement, essentially. This is making the space a little bit wider in a couple of locations.
I understand that. I was just wondering in general terms when they restore the temporary easement parts.
Just in general terms, unless there's something contrary, the understanding is typically that if it's not done correctly, then it isn't restored to as good condition as it was before, because if it was in as good condition as it was before, it wouldn't have washed away. It didn't wash away when it rained in the past. That's the argument, at least from the township's perspective. Are there counter arguments to that? You know what those are, but.
Sure. Okay, I'm good. It was just one of those questions that came up.
We were all out there on South Vandenboom looking at the erosion. I'm sure that's what you were thinking.
Well, and then just the comment from South Vandenboom was, their argument was we did restore it to specs. Okay, but specs didn't work. And then it's a matter of who's on the hook for restoring it again. And I just was wondering if that was not, apparently that was not addressed there. But.
Not specifically.
Okay,
All
right.
But the next time we do a contract with somebody.
Well, we haven't signed this one yet.
Pete, did you have your hand up?
No, as long as we bring it up.
Dan?
And the biggest problem we ran into in South Vandenboom was that they didn't stake the sod down.
Right.
So the sod washed out. Had they just staked it down, everything would have been fine. So I was simply putting that into the contract, stake the sod to make it It's not that, they're just little staples, metal staples they put in there to hold it.
Well, I was just talking more in general terms. If they restore it and it doesn't hold, do they restore it again, or do we have to restore it? It goes back to an MDOT project again.
Their comment in here was, everything will be restored to prevent erosion. I think if you go by that, and if it happens a year from now, you have erosion, you didn't do it right. So I think we can go back to them at that point in time.
Seems logical. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Concerns of Organizational Performance Committee updates. Mr. Pete or Dave, whoever's got it wants to share something.
It's actually really short tonight. The Planning Commission from the April 24th meeting, short-term rental application seems to be the thing that we're doing this year. We have a request for a special use permit for a short-term rental on 230 Huron Woods Drive. The applicant's name is Ann Jackson, and we have the public hearing set for that for May 22nd at 7 p.m. And there was a short-term rental special use permit hearing currently set for tomorrow night, May 8th, for Gregory Tim for 290 South Vandenboom and Lynn Matson at 1650 Granite Avenue. And we had another public hearing for short-term rental was held on property located at 2062 Summit. The applicant was Tyler McGovern. The special use permit was unanimously approved. Other than that, the Planning Commission is working on the master plan updates. The Road Committee meeting tonight, we simply took possession of our draft copies of the Transportation Facilities Plan, and we're going to have a work session after we review them on May the 22nd I think we can finally put it to bed and submit it to the Planning Commission. The Recreation Plan update for the Recreation Committee is moving along the same lines, and at our next meeting, we're planning on getting the same draft copy of the rec plan so that we can do the final review and then get it ready for submission. We still want to make the public aware of the spring cleanup at Schwemmwood Field or Schwemmwood Park and Lions Field, and that's on May the 18th. Again, we're going to meet here in the boardroom at 10 o'clock for a brief, less than a half-hour safety meeting, and then proceed to Schwemmwood Park, after which we'll proceed to Lions Field for the cleanup, and there'll be a barbecue after. Walmart has stepped up and generously donated $200 for food and supplies for the barbecue at Lions Field. And then a reminder, I think a group would like to talk to the board at our next meeting about the Iron Range Roll. They've talked to us every year, June 1st, National Trails Day, but they'll be here at the next meeting to talk about that.
Public comment?
Yeah, just public comment. And that's it, unless somebody has questions.
Pete?
We had a meeting today on the events committee. What we try to do is set out the whole year. So it's coming June 15th, Father's Day. We're going to have the car show right over in the Westwood Mall parking lot. And second one is August 3rd. It could be Community Days at the Lions Recreation Area. The third one would be November 26th, the Christmas tree lighting in Santa at the mall.
Let's don't talk about that already.
And
that summer.
we've got in 2020, we got the hockey things coming up. But what we talked about today a little bit is about to get a little card. I've done it before. You get a calling card and you put all these dates on it, and we have some on the front end up here in the office there, and we can put it in different areas so people can just see it and then plan on it ahead of time. So we're trying to get in. They're thinking that, hey, I want to go here, I'm going to go there, So we talked about different ways of doing some advertising for it today, coming up. But just mark down June 15th, the Township Car Show, Westwood Mall. So We have good cooperation with Applebee's and the mall people, so going to be a good year for it.
Okay. Anything else to share?
I got one more thing.
Another one?
Yeah, this coming, tomorrow, if you didn't make any plans, the Marquette County Township Association has a meeting and a banquet in Michigami. You all got notices on it, I believe, but there's still time to go. It starts around 4:30 with a tour of Michigami and some other stuff, and then we have our dinner, social hour, and a little meeting, and so there's still time.
Yes, John?
Just, I think we need to make a reminder that anyone who applies for a recreation home, or whatever you want to call it, should they receive the requested grant, should they receive what they're asking for, they want to turn their home into that kind of a home, they need to know that homestead exemptions are lost the day that they get that grant. So it depends on the price of the home or the value of the home, but one should know, and I think that I expect that anyone who applies for it will be told this by the Planning Commission. It can be a considerable amount when you lose your homestead exemption. If it's a $100,000 home, that's one thing. If it's a $5,000 or $50,000, it's a considerable amount you lose. And I think that the more people need to be aware that when you apply for this, you can't have both things. You will not be allowed to keep your homestead exemption. So there's a considerable loss,
Okay.
and people need to know about it.
Just to follow up to John, that they are advised of that during the application process, and they are reminded of that during the public hearing, so that they are well aware that they are going to lose their homestead exemption.
Okay. Okay, policy discussion. Consider attorney guidance regarding committee draft minutes distribution. There is some correspondence in your packet.
Did we really have to go through a lawyer to find out?
The question was asked.
Who authorized to go to an attorney?
We did.
Who was we?
We, the manager.
Okay, as long as-
He's allowed to call the attorney and ask for guidance.
yes, as long as we're
Discussion.
going to make the same steps. Yeah.
Yep. Maybe it's not in here. I thought we, maybe.
It
did
came
we
on
put
email.
No, we sent it.
Yeah.
Send it
that's
out.
right, we
Send it out to board members.
That's right. So, Roger, give us an update.
Well, briefly, the question came up as far as, is it illegal or improper, which are maybe two different answers, to disseminate unapproved minutes of committees. For example, road committee or recreation committee minutes to the planning commission. And the short answer is it's not illegal to do that, but technically minutes are not official minutes until they are approved by the body that generated those minutes. Now, having said that, in some circumstances, you could be required to disseminate those minutes because under the Open Meetings Act, for example, the minutes of any public meeting have to be made available within 8 business days of the meeting. And if a committee or a group meets only once a month, well, the 8 days would elapse before those minutes were approved. So if there was a FOIA request for those minutes, they would have to be disseminated, but it would again be expressly stated that they are not approved and they should not be relied upon as official action because they have not been approved. So while it is not illegal to disseminate those, it can result in a fair amount of confusion in many instances if the unapproved minutes have been disseminated. I'm aware of one situation a number of years ago where the committee had come to a consensus that it would not authorize a certain type of activity or action. And the proposed minutes, the unapproved minutes, indicated that the consensus was that this action is supported. And the word "not" was inadvertently left out of those unapproved minutes. And that was a simple typographical error that was then corrected at the next meeting, but in the meantime those minutes had been dispersed and there was a question as far as whether the committee was reversing itself. If you make a practice of distributing those minutes, and this is primarily a board policy issue. The board should probably have a policy that we are not going to disseminate those, or we are going to disseminate them. But if you are going to do it, it should be clearly stated that it is a draft or that they are unapproved, or possibly with a statement of they should not be relied upon as the official action of any group or body. So the short answer is it's not illegal, but it can result in some unforeseen, untoward consequences if they are dispersed prematurely without having been approved.
Well, and some of the discussion prior to that was that the process of adding the draft minutes to the agenda at the meeting was in question. That was part of the question, was should that happen? Randy, you were first.
As the clerk, I would prefer you don't add minutes at the meeting, just because transparency that we're trying to show to the public. This board has really tried to not add anything to the agenda unless it was a true emergency last minute. In my opinion, there's no need to add unapproved draft minutes at a like, for instance, an example, a planning commission meeting, because it's a redundant thing. You're going to see them next meeting anyway, and they don't really mean anything till they're approved. So to avoid confusion and to be transparent, because once you add it at the meeting, the general public has no chance to look at it beforehand. And my opinion is you don't do that, just to be transparent. Now, we have done that in the past, but like I said, me and the supervisor have really tried to not do that unless it's a true emergency, because I don't like to go down that route where you add things last minute and the residents don't have a chance to look at it.
Several comments about this. First, I question whether this is even a board issue.
The question is having a policy on it.
Right.
So yes.
And first, I believe this issue should have been resolved between the zoning and planning administrator and the manager. It's simply a matter of, is it legal, or is it unnecessarily going to affect the budget by distributing these things? And other than that, if a commission or the board requests that the draft minutes be included in their packet, then they should simply be included. They have the right to make that request. With respect to the Planning Commission, the reason they request them is, number one, they're going to be done within 8 days of the committee meeting anyway. And in the case of the Road and/or Rec Committee, if the Planning Commission doesn't look at the draft minutes, then they won't see the approved minutes until the third meeting after the committee meeting. And they decided by consensus that they didn't want to wait until the third meeting. They would sooner see the draft minutes so they can be aware of what's going on in their committees. So that's why, by consensus, the Planning Commission requested that the draft minutes be included in the packets. Now, we've had all this discussion at the Planning Commission, and we've had all this discussion that they're really not necessary and you don't need them, and the Planning Commission decided they wanted them. They made the request. If the request is made and they're not illegal and it's not causing a whole bunch of money, and I can't believe we're causing a whole bunch of money because we got lawyers reviewing the thing at certainly not for free, so we probably got to buy a couple reams of paper for what it cost for that review. But if they request it and there's nothing illegal about it, then they should have what they're requesting. The minutes from the committees have always had draft prominently displayed across the minutes. It's the same as well the ones you get in the board packets. And I think if the board doesn't want to receive draft minutes in their packet, that's a board decision. They should just say, let's not do that. I think the Planning Commission has some good sound reasons why they want to see the draft minutes, and I don't see any reason why they shouldn't have it. I don't know why we need to set a policy on it at all.
Policy in my mind is the process, not the fact that the draft minutes are in or not in.
The process that is out there is followed. The minutes are completed within 8 days of the meeting. That's required. And when I finished the road committee minutes and Mike Springer is the secretary, he submits them to me, I go through them and look at them, and when I distribute them to the clerk, like I'm supposed to. The manager gets them, the staff facilitator at that meeting gets them, whether it's Jason or Isaac, and the road committee members get them because they need an opportunity to review them before the next meeting so they can take a look at them. And that's the distribution on them. Andrea gets a copy of them so that she can include them in the Planning Commission packet. And I don't see any reason why we can't continue that policy.
And their stamped draft.
Yeah, and as long as, I don't think the request is unreasonable, as long as they get to the committee, like, we have deadlines for our, board packets. As long as they get there in time, I don't have a problem with them getting into the, the packets, but if they're coming for some reason on a Monday or Tuesday, again, in my opinion, they shouldn't be added at the board, at the commission meeting, because at that time, the residents don't have a chance to see them. I mean, you can get them yourself in the committee, but they shouldn't be in the packet because, like I said, transparency, that's what we're trying to show here. And by not putting those in the packet, then you're springing something on the residents because they haven't had a chance to look at them.
And it's just as unusual at the Planning Commission that those would be added to the packet by an amendment as it is at the board level.
Correct.
It just doesn't happen. They're normally there. The Planning Commission packets are put together on Friday before the Planning Commission meeting, and they're there sometime during that week.
As long
having them be there and having them in the packet is not an issue.
Yeah, as long as, from my opinion, because I'm ultimately responsible for a lot of that, is you make sure it's there in the deadline. As long as it's there in the deadline, I have no problem with it being in the packet. But adding it at the time of the meeting or a few days before, I have an issue with that.
Does this board feel that we need a policy addressing draft minutes in packets and when they're added?
No.
No.
Fine. Thank you.
Does the board want to continue to have draft minutes in your packets?
I would.
Which are publicly.
We are required to have draft minutes. Correct, Roger?
You are required to have minutes available within 8 days after any public meeting.
But I think it'd be good for transparency to have them in the board packet.
But you have draft minutes of an April 16th, in this packet, you have draft minutes of an April 16th committee meeting that is now published to the public as part of the board packet. that is the opinion of only the secretary of that committee. It is not draft minutes. So do you want to have those minutes in your packet, or do you want only approved minutes in your packet that are acted on? You also have committee reports. And that was the basis of the question.
Ernie?
If the minutes come to us before they come to whatever board to get approved, they should be marked draft minutes. That's it.
That's simple.
And they are.
That, to me, that means it's draft. That means it's not official yet. It gives me some idea what's going on. If I go out and really say, that's it, I am completely wrong at that point in time. All I can say is, this is what's happening from what we have in the draft minutes. It's not been approved or anything else, so you have to take it for what it's worth in that.
And you'll notice the minutes for the road and rec committees are rather detailed as compared to the board minutes, but they're that way intentionally, so it conveys to everybody that wants to read them, whether it's the planning commission or the board, all the discussions that went on. And if you cut them down so the way the board minutes are, so there's just the motions and the topics that were discussed, there probably wouldn't be any reason that the planning commission wouldn't request them, because there's not that much information in there. But the information that's in those committee meetings is presented so that everybody can read them and know what's being talked about and what's being worked on.
Because we can't come to all these meetings.
Right.
Then perhaps the board should not have the draft minutes under your consent agenda because you're approving them under your consent agenda. Perhaps they should be listed under board and committee updates.
Probably
That's a
right.
good point.
That would probably be a good spot for him.
And again, that was the purpose for my asking the question, because they appear in your packets and you adopt them in the consent agenda as draft minutes.
Ernie?
On the planning commission minutes, those things have to be as detailed as you can get them, because if you end up going to circuit court, the judges will not talk to anyone. They'll just take your minutes, and they'll make their decision on what's in the minutes and that.
ZBA.
And I
yeah.
found that out when I was taking minutes back in the 90s on the planning commission, was to try and make it as detailed, but don't go overboard. Make sure you get all the pertinent stuff in there so they know what's going on in that. Otherwise, you could just never stop writing minutes in that.
Yes, Randy.
Speaking to the board minutes, there's a reason why they're purposely written the way they are, because
Yeah.
MTA conferences, I've been to many of them over the past several years, recommend that you don't get very detailed, just because of the fact that all minutes are supposed to be is who's at the meeting, who made the motion, was it approved, and you can have to put down public comment, of course, but that's about it. And that's the way you want it to be, because you don't want to get it too detailed, or you don't want to write a volume.
I knew that was coming.
I'm just,
I wasn't questioning your reasoning, Randy.
well,
Drawing a comparison.
and that's why I'm giving
That
you
was
the MTA's version of why minutes are written the way they are.
So, what do you want to do? Do we need a motion? Do you want to just scratch this
Move
off?
on, let's just move on, everything's fine.
Well,
Sounds
do
great.
do you, from a staff standpoint, do you want to keep draft minutes in your consent agenda?
No, move them to the board education and have under committee reports. Or I think that's where that is. Or assurance of, yeah, under committee reports, or committee reports, that would be a fine place to put draft minutes.
Assurance of organizational performance.
Yep. Thanks for that. Thanks, Roger, anyway, even though you're not appreciated. Continued discussion.
I have thick skin.
Continued discussion for letter of support for single stream recycling. I kind of brought this up already, but they're still looking for support or not. So I think I've given you enough background, unless you have more questions. I'm not sure if they're gonna need 100% of the municipalities if they are expecting it. It's not gonna happen, because they've already had 2 say no. I got Republic the other day. Dave?
I am not in favor of supporting this for a number of reasons, and most of them go back to past dealings with the Waste Management Authority. I believe there's a response, a timely response to our questions and concerns that never happens, and I think there's a general credibility question in my mind. So I do not support the request.
Ernie?
I was at that meeting and they didn't convince me, other than they want money. And they're talking about adding 75 cents a month to all the prescribers in the townships and that. That comes out to a little bit over $300,000. So I brought up the question, they took 75 cents from their capital, or what we put for their debt, and moved over to capital. That was over $300,000. And they didn't want to even talk about that when they got down to it. Yeah. So to me, whether we agree with them or not, they have the authority to add 75 cents to everybody.
They're not sure though yet. That's part of their problem, is they don't know if they can. My question too was, can you add tipping fees to a recycling charge? Are they able to do that? And apparently, even as an authority, they don't have an authority to go out and charge 2 mills, just like the library can, or the Downtown Development Authority. Not the library, that's a bad example, sorry. Downtown Development, or the Heritage Trail. Those are genuine authorities, but there's something in the articles that said, back in the day when they signed them, they don't have the authority. And the county board corroborated that they can't just go out and ask for a millage. Their attorney corroborated that. So I don't think any of us disagree with what they're trying to accomplish. It's the way they're going about it, how they're trying to figure out how to charge us for it, what that amount's going to be, how long. It's the logistics of the operation. And a clearer sense of what's happening to the glass. Do they actually have buyers? John?
I think what the Sanitation Authority is trying to do is figure out how to make the most money. That's what they're working on. And I need to have somebody tell me along the way, if that's their goal, and it sure looks like it, what are they able to do with supplies that come from outside of Marquette County? Are they able, as a sanitation authority, can they begin to take material from another county, let's say, and bring it in and for a fee charge? That works great for some people, but it's not really something that we want to get involved with the Sanitation Authority after our past experiences with them. Without that restriction being lifted, I think it will, all that will happen is that they will begin to think about what they can do to make more money by bringing in someone else's waste and running it through these same machines that the people in Marquette County paid for.
Well,
I'm not real comfortable with that.
Their beginning premise was that they want to keep this stuff out of the landfill, to lengthen the life
Their
of the
landfill.
our
Our
landfill.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, but
So, and there's validity there. That does make sense.
wait a minute,
Because
if
these
you, if
cells
you
are very
bring something
expensive.
from outside and you run it through the machinery that we pay for in Marquette County, some of it is going to go into our landfill.
No, this is just recycling they're talking about. Single stream recycling, just recycling. But as it stands right now, the businesses especially, some of my waste, I understand, is taken out of the county, out of the state by GAD or North Country Disposal or whoever you use. That goes away. That stuff could be recycled, and their idea is to bring in more because recycling revenue is generated on volume. And if they're going to bring something from out of the county, yes, those people should pay to subsidize what we have contributed as a county. So that part of their financing, I don't have a problem with that, and their methodology. It's the way they think that we're gonna pay the 4.9 million is what I have a problem with. And whether they have the authority to do a millage or add money, tipping fees to things, you know, it's $6. You said 75 cents. They
75
threw
cents.
around $6 and $9, and that really wasn't clear. I don't know if the $6 was on the 300,000, because it was 10 years to pay off. They had to have 300,000 to pay that 3 million, and it was a 10-year loan, no interest. And I don't remember, I probably have it in my notes. Go ahead.
It was $300,000 a year for 10 years to pay off that loan,
The 3 million,
3 million.
Right.
That way. But there were a lot of questions, and one of them, question was come up about contacting other municipalities outside of Marquette County. And they danced around the question. They have not really gone out and done that. And they said, well, we gotta have something working first. Well, if you're going into a business type environment, you start looking at all your possible revenues right up front. You don't put all this big dollars into it and then, oh, now we gotta go out and look and see if we can bring in all this other stuff. To me, that's that's not a management type involvement. That's not a business plan. You're talking about looking at a business plan. And they didn't have one, as far as I'm concerned. And they talked about glass, and they danced around that a lot of time, too. So, to me, they had a lot of high, how do I want to put it, very high video type presentation, but they didn't have answers to them. So, I'm not enthusiastic about moving forward on this at all, at this point in time.
One of the other municipalities, I don't know if, I didn't know the gentleman, if he was a supervisor or what function he played, but he said the same thing. We haven't really seen a business plan. We don't know how this is gonna come together. They've got 3 different ways of thinking of how to come up with the 1.9 million, but none of them are really, they don't have an answer yet, but they wanna do this now anyway.
That was Jim Nat Garrison,
Yeah, it was
Ishpeming Township.
No, there was a guy in the back.
Yeah,
It was
one
sat
from
next to
Republic
me.
and,
No, big
Sounds a
guy.
lot like
Yeah,
BLT.
that was from
Gary
Nagani Township.
Nagani, Gary Warmer.
Okay, I didn't know him.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the same thing, Lynn, is that the tipping fee, they got lost because they're charging, then they're gonna take it off. They don't have anyone yet to sign up and say they will bring it, because if you go into this debt and put these machineries in, you have to have something to get in so they can move it out and sell it, you know, get rid of it.
And they've said that
Nobody
the,
signed up on them yet.
right, they said that the road commission was interested in the different kinds of glass and
Right.
maybe some of the landscapers, but how do you go into $6 million with, you know, maybe?
Trust me.
Yeah, I know.
Well, the road commission will only be interested during the winter.
Yeah, and some of it.
One more. Just think about the makeup of the authority. The makeup of the authority doesn't do anything for this township. The makeup for the authority is, correct me, Gerard,
Manager Gerard?
my recollection is 3 people on the board are from the city. two people.
From the county, I think,
Yeah.
or county appointed.
Yeah. So all of a sudden, you're on the outside looking in at anything that they are doing. And it's right back to where it was about 2 years ago, when we couldn't get them to even meet with us to explain to us why they were doing what they were doing.
Prior supervisors, as well as current supervisor, have requested consideration of expanding the membership on the authority that has gone nowhere to have a township presence.
And if history repeats itself, it will not go anywhere.
Dave?
Looking at the packet information that was provided, I found it kind of interesting that they went to all the trouble to add the county of Marquette as a constituent municipality, but then they go to all the trouble to explain everything that they're not accountable for.
Right.
And other than, the only thing they're accountable that I got out of that is to appoint people to the board, to the authority. But they took no responsibility for anything else. The whole thing just seemed ridiculous.
At the authority meeting last month, when they agreed that they were going to have this presentation at the county township meeting, I stood up and said, I hope, and they actually put it in the minutes, I hope that all the fuss you guys made 2 years ago to get the county out and had to have signatures and ballots and everything signed and the articles approved and everything else to show that the county was not involved, hasn't come back to bite you now because the county is not involved, but you want the county support. And they didn't have a response to it. It was just comical. So I would like to send a letter of non-support. That's my recommendation, if the board.
So we get the answers. You know, I think Ishmael is waiting for the same answers. He's not going to sign on until he gets his answers.
And I'd be happy with using the Ishpeming letter and just changing the letterhead, unless,
The selling points of something like this is, yes, they're trying to save what's going in the ground. You know, that's a great point. That's a
Yeah,
good
absolutely.
selling point. But they have to be able to pay for it, and there's a reason, if you're going to take in glass and that from other counties, where we're going to get on.
what are we gonna do with that?
You know, we're going to get rid of it. How can you sell it?
I wanna know how much it's gonna cost and how they're gonna pay for
And the
it.
tipping charges, you know, yes, I got to find the answers though for that.
So,
you
yes,
got motion for that?
I'll support it.
send a letter of non-support. Okay. Any
Roll call
other-
vote.
Any other discussion? Roll call, sir.
Supervisor Durant,
Yes.
trustee Everson,
Yes?
trustee LaRue,
Yes,
trustee Wiegand,
Yes.
trustee Marks,
Yes.
treasurer Johnson,
Yes.
and clerk Rattari is yes. So you'll send a letter of non-support.
Correct.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you.
For the reasons explained, basically.
Yep.
you might want to expand your minutes on that one.
No, no, no.
Okay. Consider MTA resolution for nonpartisan township elections. One of the first meetings I went to at MTA when I was a trustee, this came up 2 years in a row. And the first year, it was overwhelmingly defeated. And they were standing in the aisles, lined up, why this was such a terrible idea, because it's going to get lost on the ballot, and everything about libraries and schools and everything will be ahead of it, and the candidates are all going to be pushed at the bottom, and they're going to, the elections will be a fiasco, and they went on and on and on. The second year, nobody really paid much attention, but everybody voted. And they actually made us stand up and kind of, they went through and counted both years, because it was, you couldn't tell by the voice votes. So apparently somebody's resurrected this idea again. And the whole point is to not have it be a partisan election. And in many communities and many different municipality levels, it's not. It doesn't matter if you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, you know, anything.
I brought that up to you as soon as I got on the board. I
Yeah,
said,
that
"This
was
is
one of your
stupid."
first questions, is how do
Stupid.
I do this? Yeah, and I did too. I came into Lois and said, I don't know what, you know, I vote for who I vote for. Why should I have to declare that?
Well, the deadline's done anyway, so that takes care of that subject.
No, it isn't, actually.
It says April 30th.
They've extended it. Yeah, it's May, I thought I put that in there.
Oh.
May 17th? I'm pretty sure, I'm positive.
I just thought we'd hurry by that one.
It's, they did extend it. Randy?
I move to approve the resolution for nonpartisan township elections.
Support.
And my comment was, we can move the MTA into the 21st century.
Exactly.
Okay.
One of the first things, like Lynn said, that I brought up when I asked, why do we have
When
this?
I filled out the paperwork. Anything else?
I supported that MTA. Actually talked about it, and I said, I ran for school board. They don't care, they just want your name, who you are. You have to go out and sell yourself, not whether you're a Republican or a Democrat or Independent and that. And this was a time that they got up and they were afraid that if you weren't a Democrat or Republican, you would lose out, and would lose out of state money, and would lose out of this and that and everything else.
Yep.
Oh, there was people there that was, they're ready to fight
They
for
were-
it
yeah,
down
they
there.
were angry.
Oh, it was unbelievable in that.
Okay, all in favor?
It's a roll call, so. Clerk Rattari, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Trustee Everson?
Yes?
Trustee LaRue?
Yes?
Trustee Wiegand?
Yes.
Trustee Marks?
Yes.
Treasurer Johnson?
Yes.
And Supervisor Durant.
Yes.
My only other comment, and motion carries 7-0, and I talked to the supervisor about this, and this probably would never happen in the near future, but I think it would be good for staggered terms. So you don't clean out boards all at once. But I know that would be a big problem to try to get that moving, but maybe slowly over the years, maybe. But doesn't it make sense you don't clean out boards all at once? And,
Yeah, we could
Well,
all
you
be
can't have
gone
any
next year.
consistency.
yeah, so.
7 of us.
You know,
No
a lot-
history?
A lot of other places do it, and I don't understand why the state of Michigan don't do it, but maybe someday we can do it.
What's the process of changing that then, Randy?
State statute.
State legislators would have to change that.
Maybe nobody's asked him.
Well, maybe we can ask.
Maybe it hasn't
Yeah.
come up.
Could be a good thing to start.
Okay. Consider administrative offices seasonal hours. This should be short and sweet.
I'll make a motion, we approve.
Support.
Comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thanks, guys. Public comment. We even lost our mining journal. We talked too much tonight. Wrap up. Announcements. One thing to share, 492 speed limit around that corner is 45 miles an hour. Now, we had asked for a.
Commerce Drive West.
Yes,
And it is
we
being,
had asked for a speed study, and they did lower the speed limit. I wanted to give you the update.
Good.
and it is being
surprised,
enforced. And for those handful of drivers that flipped me off today for being in a vehicle going 40 miles an hour in that stretch to get the target, I hope you get caught.
Is it
You will.
posted?
It's
Yeah.
posted, large signs, 40
Yes,
miles an
multiple
hour
signs.
from Commerce Drive West
Good.
in the construction zone. And it is a state construction zone, so fines will double. And if you're involved in an accident, it's a hefty, hefty fine. If there's an injury to one of the workers, it's, I think, what, $1,700?
Huge.
Well, it's 3 points too, I think.
Yeah.
3 points on your license. So I hope the drivers pay attention and slow down, because if you don't, you're gonna get tagged.
Maybe we should have our deputies sitting up there.
Oh, state police
They should
and
be,
county
yeah.
sheriff were very busy over the weekend.
Good.
Yeah, they've been patrolling very well. I'm
Yeah,
really
I saw
happy.
3 separate cars pulled over at the same time, going in different directions.
Yes, Dave?
Was your comment about the 45, was that at 492?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because remember, we had the request from
Right,
the
yep,
resident,
I remember that.
and we did ask for the speed study. And I didn't know if you guys knew that, so. Yes, Mandy?
So the speed change was on 492.
Yes, and also
Around-
US 41,
Around Bishop Woods,
Okay.
that circle.
and also US 41,
And US 41 during construction.
40.
Okay, the announcements I have is we are now going to have an election on August 7th, which the township is not going to be tagged for the cost. It's going to be Marquette County Medical, the nursing home. They're going to,
County Medical Facility?
facility is going to run a millage question on August 7th, so, excuse me, any cost we incur for that election will be reimbursed, so it won't tag us for anything. The Saturday before, I believe we're gonna set the hours. Me and Lois are gonna talk about what hours. We have to be open 8 hours the weekend before the election now, with Proposal 3 has changed that. So we will set the hours where we'll be available here. You can register to vote up to the day of the election, including the day of election. However, if you come to the polls, you can't register to vote there. You have to come to the township office and register here, and then we'll give you a card or an information to go to the polls, and then you can vote. And let's see, what else?
So Randy, excuse me, if we should have something that we want to do, we can do it then. And if-
Well,
No?
your timeline is very
Well, it's
short.
usually May.
Yeah, May, middle of May is for August, so we can't really tag anything along with this one.
Well, we could.
You could, but
if we had
it'd be a real rigorous process to get it done. But, and it's just a one question. I don't see the attendance at this election very high, so we are not going to run an absentee precinct. We'll just run the absentees in the precinct because last time we had one of these elections, out of 3,000 voters, we had 201 votes, so it's not going to be a very high election. So, and I think the cutoff is 14 days. If you can register to vote through the mail or at the Secretary of State's office up to 14 days before the election. After 14 days, you have to come to the office here to register. So that was also a change in the election law. So we will keep you updated, and I will let the residents know what our Saturday or Sunday hours will be. That will be open the Tuesday, which is August 7th, before the election. And it's August 3rd. If we're going to be open, we'll be open the same day as Community Day, so
I thought you said August 7th.
it's Tuesday, yeah.
Oh, the 3rd that would be
Yeah.
open, okay.
Or I'm thinking it's
Saturday.
going to be Saturday.
Mhm.
But on the notice of election that we place throughout the township, we will put on what hours will be open,
Okay.
so,
August 7th, we're playing, is the election?
yes.
It's a Wednesday?
Or is it August 6th?
Must be 6th.
Sixth.
Okay, it's the 6th then.
Tuesday.
Yeah, it was a white, bright year.
Well, some of those books have 2 years.
It's the Tuesday after the first Monday,
Monday.
so it's August 6th.
Any other announcements? Okay, managers report.
Well, apologize for not being here at your last meeting. However, I did watch the YouTube tape of it, so I'm familiar with what the discussion was. I do have a printed report. Trustee LaRue has already mentioned the Community Events Catch the Vision Car Show coming up on the June 15th, which is Father's Day weekend. So that's in the Westwood Mall parking lot. And that's our first big event of the year for the Community Events Committee. Very well attended, and it's generally a good time. We usually have the rain start about 2:30, so if you have a car and you'd like to be there, be prepared to make a quick dash when the clouds come off the lake. Our history our last 3 years is we've had rain about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So that's always a fun event. It's a lot of fun. I don't have any more comments on the printed report unless you have questions. I just have a couple of follow-ups from the last board meeting. There was a question basically about vandalism, the damage and the recovery for costs of vandalism. It's one of the things that we do try to do is to recover where we can. Most of the vandalism items that have happened, the hole being punched in the wall at the at the warming facility, the people tearing up the turf around the facility and on Lions Field, and the damages to the bathroom were either unwitnessed or done by somebody that we've not been able to identify. The most egregious one was the damage that was done to the restroom with the sinks being torn off the wall. Although we had good video image of the people who did it, nobody could identify them. Not local law enforcement, not the school district, nobody that we know was able to identify those folks. The one that we could identify were the two kids that did the damage to the doorway. We did not pursue that because our staff basically just put it back together. It was a minimal cost. We did talk with the parents. But we do make the efforts, and I think if I'm not mistaken, Dan, you might know better than this, but my understanding is that the fire alarm that was pulled, they couldn't identify who did it. It was...
Well, most likely they don't identify who did it. No, it's just a kid that's in the restaurant and...
But I mean, when the call came in, they couldn't identify who it was that pulled the alarm. So I mean, we do try to recover. And in fact, I think the fire, not ordinance, but the fine, the structure does have in it for continued false alarms a fine to whatever the business is or whoever that they are tagged on that. There was a question about fire coverage when we have people that are gone or whatever, and those all go through me. They're all approved by me, and we make sure that there is coverage, so you're never going to find a situation Monday through Friday where we don't have our daytime staff covered. It's either covered by the three folks that are there, a replacement for one or two of them if they're out sick or on vacation or whatever, and then I have my building and ground staff that are also firefighters. So we always have the coverage. We're not going to find ourselves in a spot where the coverage isn't there. The last thing I want to mention is on Friday, May 17th, which is a week from this Friday, between 2 o'clock and 8 o'clock, Pierce Fire is going to be here in town in Marquette. It's their Pierce Road Rally.
At our station.
They're going to be at our station. It's called the Pierce Road Rally. And basically what it amounts to is there are several departments in the UP that are interested in looking for new equipment. So they're bringing 5 pieces of equipment up to the UP. They're going to be stationed at our hall for people to come and take a look at. And that's on Friday, the 17th of May, if you want to come between 2 o'clock and 8 o'clock. They are not going to impede our operation of the fire department. I've worked with Chief Shanahan, and the way we're going to have them staged will not interfere or impede the hall. We're arranging for visitor parking off-site, either here at the Township Hall or across the street at the office building across the street in the after-hours session. So I think it's a good PR thing for us. It's a good thing for us with regard to Pierce, because there will come a time when we'll be looking for a piece of equipment ourselves. So
At 2 o'clock to what?
between 2 o'clock and 8 o'clock. Open to the public. There's going to be refreshments, and I mean, it's going to be a nice deal. So bring your kids, let them see some different kinds of trucks. Basically, they're going to have, let's see, they gave us a list. They're going to have an aerial. They're going to have a 107-foot aerial there. They're going to have an Enforcer pumper, a Sabre pumper, Freightliner pumper, 3,000-gallon tanker, and a Medallion ambulance. So those items will all be here at our hall for public viewing and for other departments to come and take a look at with regard to what their needs are. So I think that's a good thing for our staff and for our department. Good PR. And other than that, I don't have anything else other than my schedule is being restricted by the folks that are handling my care and my recovery, so I'm limited to 5-hour days. So for the next couple of weeks, I'll be alternating mornings and afternoons in the office around my physical therapy structure.
You know, I gotta say too, Mr. LaHillier made some comments about Randy not returning his call, and I wasn't involved in some of that first discussion where I could have returned them. Randy was in the hospital, and he didn't understand, and I wasn't able to tell him because I didn't know that at the time that it was an issue. I knew we had the issue, but I didn't know that, you know, he was doing the emails and stuff, so I would have responded and just said, Randy's out of commission right now, you know, so that was just kind of a slip up.
I did contact him as I could.
When you could, yeah.
And did follow up, you know, outside of the office, but there are just some things that we just have no authority to be involved in. We don't have any responsibility. We have no statutory or constitutional authority to get involved in things that fall under the road commissioner or under the drain commissioner. And as much as I would have liked to have sent, you know, one of our service workers at the backhoe over there to try and do something, weight restrictions are in place, and we can't use that unless it's an emergency type of a basis, a public emergency, which that wasn't. It was an emergency for the Hillier family, but it didn't fit in the criteria for doing that during weight restrictions in Trowbridge.
Do you have your hand up, Dave? Or was it Pete? Somebody did.
I did. I had a question for Randy is, what about the water meters? Are we updated on all those? Are they all changed over now?
I think they've all been changed over now.
Okay, all right. Also, we're going to continue having these roundabout pamphlets up at the
Yes.
office?
Yep,
So
we
when
have-
you come into the office, if you want to know something about the roundabouts, since we're going to get 2 more of them or 3 more, we got information at the front desk. Damages that were done by young men or ladies, whoever who done them, I don't know. But I don't think we should let them go without doing something. I think, you know, if they can do something like that, they sure can lean over and pick up papers, and I think we should, part of that, say that you have to give so many hours of something, because, you know,
Yeah, good idea.
Certainly could.
you know, they just can't get away with doing nothing. That bothers me, you know. We didn't know who did the first one, the hole in the wall, you know, by the thing, but, you know, I wish I would have known, because I thought of that then, but.
Is that it, Pete?
Marijuana. The big push is on getting done by August, and then September, you might see some licensing being put out this coming September. So I just,
We are gonna have it on the next agenda to schedule a work session.
yeah, okay.
I already talked to Randy today about it. We need to have some discussion on where we're gonna go, so when this hits, I'm getting phone calls and emails and everything from people who wanna come in. So, yeah, letters too.
It was an interest, they're gonna have another meeting, the city's gonna have another one, but I'll attend that, but it just go for information, that's what, you know, I like to, I know very little about marijuana, but I'm starting to learn more and more about it, so. When you're voted on something, you've gotta know a little bit about it, so. And that's all I
Is
have.
it? Okay, Dave.
Just the recovering costs, the manager's cost. I realize that the cost may have been minimal, but there's still costs there that we should
Yes.
recover. And I think the board should address this in a policy, stating that we will recover costs whenever they can be identified. And I think a simple policy should be, and that way it doesn't matter who you are, or what you're doing, or whether it was an accident, or whether it was kids, or we need to recover those costs. There's no reason the rest of the residents of the township are paying for that.
Okay.
Okay, with We Energies closing up shop, we have fly ash in the township. Where do we stand with that at this point in time?
That still falls under the contract that we have with them for the landfill cells. They're responsible for that, and basically what's going to happen is that the majority of the fly ash that we have in our waste facility, which is up by the Caymanon trailhead, basically, is pretty high-grade stuff that is being mined and shipped out to other states, basically, to use with concrete and road construction. Can't do that in Michigan because there might be traces of mercury, so the DEQ will not allow that to be used in Michigan, but it is going elsewhere. And every year, we get revenue, basically, from that as they mine it. Very small, I mean, it's not very much, but it will ultimately be mined. But they are still responsible for maintaining that and are responsible for that landfill, both of the landfills, there's 2 of them.
Regardless whether they're here or not.
Correct, Yep, they're under, it's under an agreement that we have with the company.
Anything else for the manager?
I got one quick question. I got a call today, and actually I wasn't even aware of it. Of a stoplight now on Wright Street and 41. I mean, that stop, is it just a one, he was saying it was a one-way stop.
That may be a temporary during the construction.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, they're all temporary.
It is?
the lights.
Yeah.
They're all
Okay.
pulled
They
out.
haven't activated it yet.
Okay.
Yeah, they're gonna put several temporary lights up to control traffic as the construction goes on.
I did indicate that to him, and I said, but I would follow up with it, so.
Yeah, because they have indicated that they're gonna maintain one lane in each direction throughout the construction. Now, that's gonna be very congested because we've got summer traffic coming up with motorhomes and trailers and people traveling through the area that aren't familiar with it. And more and more, I think more and more local motorists will be avoiding US 41 and using Werner, Wright Street, Brookton, Northwoods, using alternate routes, those that know how to get around it.
According to MDOT, that stoplight is so that the eastbound traffic on 41 can get down to Wright Street, because they're going to be restricted from making left-hand turns at the Walmart intersection while they're doing the first 2 phases of that roundabout.
It was interesting the other day when they had a 4-way stop there.
I have asked them to keep the fire department advised of all of those changes, because you folks need to be able to respond. So they have committed that they will do that, and I believe they have been talking with Chief Shanahan.
Anything else for the manager?
One other thing. I don't want to sound like Dave, but, no offense, Dave. What's the status on the new computers? Where?
Waiting for the proposal. I have provided all that information to 906, and we had some varied requests, and I have asked them to consolidate all of those requests to come up with a recommendation that all board members could be compliant with, and we're waiting for that to arrive.
On the time frame?
I have not talked to them in the last couple of weeks. I will be in touch with them shortly.
Thanks.
Okay?
Okay, review of motions, please.
Okay, consent agenda was approved, no changes. Approval of the regular agenda was approved, no changes. The second motion of the evening, or third motion, was to grant the Semco temporary request. An action item was to move the committee minutes to under assurance of organizational performance under committee reports. That's an action item for staff. Fourth motion was to not support the letter of single stream recycling. Fifth motion was to approve the MTA resolution for nonpartisan township elections. Sixth motion was to approve the administrative office seasonal hours. And that's it.
Okay, so for future agenda, other than a couple things I mentioned, we will have a second reading on the fireworks. Fortunately, our attorney extraordinaire picked it up. The Randys and I missed it, that we didn't have the second reading, so that'll be on the next agenda. I'm gonna,
A noise ordinance.
yes.
Second reading.
Asset management work session, we're gonna schedule that. And policy discussion on recovering damage costs. I've also got 3 or 4 more things I've given her, but that's all I have for right now. Any board member comment?
Just be careful out there.
Anything else? We've said it all then.
Move to adjourn.
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. We are done. 8:43.